So first I want to kind of introduce the topic and the panelists, the folks that we have here today. So in terms of topic and discussion, we are going to be talking about data hygiene and specifically some commonly encountered problems, issues around data hygiene, process adherence alignment, and then we've got some kind of specific examples that we'll be kind of sharing, walking through as well in terms of solutions to solve some of those problems. And the reason why we're focused on this topic and where this all really stems from is RevOps Co-op partnered with Scratchpad, and we did a survey of 200 plus RevOps leaders about kind of common challenges and things that are going on in revenue operations. And there were kind of three big takeaways from that. And I'll pull this report up in a little bit. We'll walk through it. I think Ben from Scratchpad and Dylan on the RevOps Co-op team will also probably drop a link in the chat for anyone to download the report. But one of the three big takeaways in terms of challenges that RevOps leaders are faced with today is around data hygiene. So specifically, we're going to double click on that topic a little bit. Today, we've got a couple of folks from Crunchbase who are going to kind of be on this panel, and we're going to talk through, like I said, some specific problems, challenges that they've seen, and they'll be sharing some solutions and some ways that they've solved that. So with that, first I want to introduce Mackenzie Clements, who is on the revenue operations and customer operations team at Crunchbase. While very accomplished on the professional side, fun fact about Mackenzie on the personal front is she's been to more countries than she is years old. When she told me that, I did not ask what her age was, but she has been to 32 countries. And she handles a lot of the kind of the post-sales, or I guess the customer ops side of Crunchbase. And then her counterpart on the RevOps team is Natalie Blardoni, who is a sales ops manager at Crunchbase and primarily focused on called the pre-sales side. And fun fact about Natalie is she has written 2 books. Both of them are poetry collections. And so actually afterwards, I think maybe I'm going to have to ask Natalie for you to write a haiku or something on revenue operations. I think that might be interesting to share with the crew here. But thank you both. Thank you both for being here and really appreciate it. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to pull up this kind of RevOps trends report that we shared. And like I said, I think Ben dropped the link if you all want to kind of download it for yourself. But I just want to walk through a couple of things on this. It's 17 plus pages. We're not going to look at this whole thing and talk through it in detail. But like I said, we interviewed 200 plus, or we gathered insights. We surveyed 200 plus RevOps leaders for purposes of this survey. And like I said, some of the 3 main takeaways that we had were around sales rep performance, forecasting accuracy, and really process adherence or data hygiene. And so on the data hygiene side is kind of the number one thing that popped up, and really what we specifically want to dive into and kind of double click on today. And we've got some more content that we'll be kind of sharing on that. But I think anyone in revenue operations has faced this issue or this challenge around data hygiene, data governance, right? Trying to wrap your arms around the whole notion of kind of garbage in, garbage out, right? Controlling the data that you have. And I know one of the big things that pops up as I guess a challenge, or one of the insights that we've seen here, is this kind of emergence of what's called the shadow tech stack, the shadow sales stack. The use of tools that aren't necessarily connected to your CRM, that are producing data, but data that you're not necessarily capturing. And then the other is around changing the behaviors of the people who are supposed to be inputting data, right? Whether that's automatically or manually, right? Changing behavior is hard, as we kind of saw here. And so this is specifically some of the stuff that we're going to be diving into. And like I said, there's a lot more on this report that is here. I encourage you all to go out and download this today if you haven't already. But I guess before we kind of dive into some of the slides and the things that we have, Natalie and Mackenzie, I guess I want to hear from you first on like this whole notion of data quality, data hygiene, and maybe Natalie, we start with you because you're on the pre-sales, the sales side at Crunchbase. It's like when you hear data quality or maybe like data governance, like what are the first things that pop to mind for you? Like, what does that mean to you? And then Mackenzie, I'll ask you the same thing on like the post-sale or customer ops side, because I'm sure it's kind of different. But Natalie, what's your first impression? Like, what's the first thing that pops up when you hear data quality, data governance?
Yeah, for sure. I think for data quality, what I'm thinking of immediately is, do the reps who I'm ultimately there, my role is to help ensure that they are as successful as possible. Do they have the data that they need in order to get the job done? And if the data isn't there, if the quality isn't as great, then what can I do to help improve the ways in which we capture the data, as well as the ways we help reps input that data? Because data quality, to me, is just a means to success for kind of my reps who I support.
Yeah. And so I was going to ask that question of like, so why is it as important? And I guess you kind of answered it there at the end in terms of making your reps successful. But I guess, does that mean selling more, closing more deals, closing deals faster? Like, what does success kind of mean? Like, what's the outcome that good data quality can kind of lead to or drive?
Totally. I think, of course, they're the quantifiable metrics, like is the sales cycle, is it shortening over time? Is our win rate increasing? Do we have more upsells and expansions? Ultimately, like, I hope and try to get the reps to kind of all align under the whole message that, like, we just want our customers ultimately to be happy. And if our data quality is there, that means the reps are performing. That means they're able to use that data to make more informed kind of decisions. They can move the process along, and they can ultimately get our customers the solution that they need.
Yeah. And Mackenzie, what about for you on the customer operations side, or the kind of the post-sales side? What is like, how do you look at data quality, data governance at Crunchbase, and then how's that maybe different, or I don't know, maybe the same as Natalie?
I think one of the things that comes to mind when I think about data quality is just continuous process. It's like, how many ways can we continue to be improving the data, changing the data, especially in a tech company. The goalposts move a lot, that what we're after changes, and making sure that the data that we're putting in our CRMs and in our systems also matches what it is for the goals that we have. Because if that changes and we're not changing the data that's coming in, then we're not arming our reps or our CSMs with the information they need in order to do their jobs more efficiently.
Yeah. And I know, I guess one of the things I think you mentioned it, Natalie, was this whole notion of expansion revenue. And actually kind of look at this page in the report in terms of largest opportunities for revenue in 2023. And you can see, 45.8, 46% of people identified expansion revenue as the biggest opportunity, right? Amongst, some other things, right? Generating more pipe and increasing win rates. But I think especially in today's environment, getting a new customer is hard, right? And so you want to obviously keep the customers that you have, but expansion revenue is also can also be a big part of revenue growth for any business, any company going forward. So how do you all, I guess, where does expansion revenue maybe lie on the RevOps side? Is that something that you all work together on? And how do again, how does this notion of kind of data quality and data governance play into that for you both on the expansion side specifically?
So it's something we definitely work very closely on from the ops side, but also from the sales and CS leadership. Because last year, let's say it was more of like a shared responsibility. And this year, although it's definitely a team partnership, it's ultimately owned by the sales team at Crunchbase. And so when we look at the data quality, we're thinking about from the very beginning of the pre-sale stage is how can we make sure the data that's input into the system, whether it's firmographic data or coming from the rep, holds through all the way to the CSM. So then when the CSM starts with the account, they get off to a good start. They understand what the success metrics are, how a customer is going to be successful. And that all sets us up for that moment of getting to that land and expand pay that we're all really hoping for. And so we're trying to think about, of course, an age-old pain point is like, what does that handoff look like? What are the data points that are included in such a handoff? And how do we make sure that the information that we're asking people to input is actually impactful to the cycle? So that by the time the CSM is onboarding and the customer is maybe ripe and ready for that upsell, that the AEs can be brought back into the conversation if they're not already present already, and then carry that forward. So not only is it seamless for our reps, but as Natalie mentioned, is thinking about customer first. Is how do we make it not feel like we're always just pitching the customer, but that we're more having a conversation and providing a solution.
Yeah, makes sense. And I guess before we get too far down the alignment path, I know what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the slides that we have and talk through specifically start with the data hygiene stuff. And I guess the first thing that I'm going to talk about, one of the most at least common, I think, data hygiene issues is duplicates in your CRM and across your tools or your system. So as I'm pulling these slides up, I guess maybe Natalie, start with you. Tell us some I don't know, maybe you have some war stories, some scar tissue built up from duplicates in the past. Like, give us some maybe like the before picture of some of those stories that you've seen or maybe experienced firsthand on the duplicate front, and then we can get into how you all are kind of solving for some of those things at Crunchbase.
Totally. So I started at Crunchbase as an SDR. So I'm sure that I was also responsible for some of the dupes that were in our Salesforce that I am now cleaning up. But actually Q1, one of my OKRs was one of my objectives was to really go through and dedupe our Salesforce as much as possible, right? That went from leads to contacts, and then also matching lead to contacts, and then accounts. And there are just upwards, of like 5-10 duplicates sometimes of an account. And sometimes that can be really difficult for, it creates problems with rules of engagement for reps of like, hey, I got this meeting. But hey, I'm also this other rep is also reaching out. Who does the credit go to, or where does the op get created, or different things like that. And it was even with like lead routing, if it didn't catch the duplicate, or maybe routed to two separate ones, or maybe, accounts came in from different tools, which reps were downloading on their own, or something that, were slightly different in name. So the deduping did not catch it. And so then therefore it created multiple accounts. And so it created a lot of friction internally. It also created friction for customers who are receiving messages from different reps, and they're like, who do we talk to? Who's our point of contact here? Overall, not a pleasant scene for sure.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think, so it sounds like obviously you have some rules, some process set up to obviously try to eliminate duplicates before they happen, right? And I'll let you maybe speak to some of those, but I thought the interesting thing first that you have here is also basically providing a kind of a self-serve way for what your reps, your SDRs, like the end user, to actually find their own duplicates. Is that right?
Yeah, totally. So one of the cool things that happened over the course of the last few months is through using, obviously we're Crunchbase, so we use Crunchbase, and we have these RevOps office hours that happen weekly that are specific for different teams. And a rep brought up the idea of like, hey, I think, instead of, we know that deduping our Salesforce is one of your OKRs. Why don't we go through and kind of do it together and make a bit of like, have a little fun out of it. So we used maybe like an hour of time. Everybody gets together in a Zoom room, maybe you play some music if you're into it, and then found a way to use our query builder to build a search so we could see all duplicates that were your own. So as that session went on, people are chatting, listening to music, and then it's just kind of going through these accounts and saying, okay, if I'm James, I see that I have 1,200 duplicates. I'm just going to go through and kind of deep dupe them together. And it was a really great way to kind of replicate some of that in-office bonding that used to happen, while also getting a chance to kind of tackle this deduping process together.
Yeah, That's awesome. I love the idea of I don't know, I was gonna say sharing the misery, but in this case, like maybe spread the love a little bit. Like how can you make this a yeah, like a, I don't want to say fun, but like, make it an enjoyable experience. And I love the notion of like the teamwork there too, right? Of like deduping one is not just a, call it a like a systems task, but it's not just like, it shouldn't just be owned by, call it RevOps, right? And yeah, so I love the shared ownership there. I guess Mackenzie, is there anything on the post-sales side related to duplicates that kind of like comes up or pops up? Like what are some of those things that you've experienced on the customer ops side where yeah, where kind of dedupes or duplicates can insert friction?
So for us, it's a little bit of dupes, and then sometimes perhaps just more on hierarchy, is that we went through a restructure and we're still kind of working out the kinks of properly setting up a parent-child hierarchy and making sure that all the accounts that are supposed to be aligned in the right place are in the right place and have the right owners. And so we run into dupes not as often, just because it's coming through the sales process. We have that close one off, and therefore we know that that account is a customer, but still trying to look at, do these accounts have the right status associated with them? Are all the customers active customers? Are automations firing based on the right criteria? And the same thing for former customer, to make sure that we have a good handle on not only those numbers that we're looking to report up to the board or management, et cetera, but also that we know how many accounts people are working and what's actually in the CRM. So like I said, a little bit less on the dupe side, but still trying to figure out what is the structure and make sure that things are properly tied together for visibility.
Yeah, makes complete sense. And last question, Natalie, for you on this as we before we move off the duplicate subject is and maybe you answered in the chat, but yeah, as if you can like, one, do you use any deduping tools that run in the background, either anything set up on the front end to try to eliminate duplicates before they happen, or anything set up on the back end to help you identify dupes or to do the deduping? And then also, yeah, if you can share, like, what kind of adoption do you see on the like the office hours that you have? I know I've had I'll say like varying degrees of success with that when I've tried it in the past, but curious what you're seeing there.
Totally. So for the first question around deduping, so I've used a few different free tools from the App Exchange to surface dupes and help me dedupe things in bulk. One of the ones I did for my most recent was an app called No Duplicates. It was free for a long time because it was in beta, and I think they're starting to ramp up their monthly charging. We also use, and I think it's in one of the slides here, we set up some of Salesforce's matching rules to use in their duplicate rules, but they can only go so far. There's no fuzzy matching available with some things. But that helps a little bit. And then, we try to encourage folks to use tools where for prospecting that allows you to see which accounts already exist in our Salesforce, so they're not pushing that like duplicate data into our system to begin with. And then we also, Lean Data has, which is what we use for lead routing. They go through the process of deduplicating and matching accounts when leads are coming in and when ops are coming in and all that. So that helps us stay organized on that front. Yeah, Lean Data is great. We love Lean Data. We've been with Lean Data for quite a while. And then for office hour adoption, it definitely, it was trial and error at first. And what we ended up doing was breaking out office hours by team. So 1 week was AEs, 1 week was SDRs, 1 week was CSMs, 1 week was BD. And so by doing that, I think it created a little bit more like comfort for folks coming in, because they're like, okay, I'm not going to take up the whole meeting and only talk about an SDR problem and, be annoying to other folks from other departments where this isn't relevant. So that definitely helped by breaking it up. And then also what we noticed helped was setting up kind of these really loose themes per week. So that way, maybe this week for AEs, the theme will be, like pipeline management or something. And that way the rep could know in advance, okay, that's going to be the theme. I can mentally prep for it. I can have a question for it or something. They'd be less nervous to attend. And then of course, other topics will organically come up, but having that theme there, I think made them feel a little bit less nervous of going to an office hour and not having anything to say. So now, there's a healthy amount of engagement with the office hours. And I think it's been helpful to the team, hopefully.
Yeah, that's great. So it sounds like, at least as it relates to kind of duplicates, I saw one, you do empower reps to create new accounts. So you don't limit things there, but you do, obviously you've got some stuff here to, for example, like on the prospecting side, like help people eliminate current accounts from anything that even pops up during prospecting, right? That's one way with, kind of process to ensure that duplicates are making their way, in. You've got some duplicate rules that are like strict but flexible in here, right? Like in your CRM and Salesforce, doing what you can to help notify, eliminate kind of dupes. And then you've obviously got, I think, the one thing to acknowledge is like there's no way you can eliminate 100% of duplicates, right? Like things are going to happen. And so put in some like some systems, some process, some capabilities to easily sniff out those duplicates, and use your own tool. Obviously, you all are kind of unique in that, but find put it in the process and the tools to find duplicates. But then I like the thing about making the dedupe process a team sport, right? Like get others involved and try to make it, call it fun or enjoyable, kind of where you can. And then let's, I guess, next thing I want to talk about was kind of on the notifications. I think this gets more into probably like not on the duplication side, but more just keeping data up to date, right? Eliminating this notion of like stale data that's in there. So yeah, talk a little bit about this, Natalie, probably more on the sales side, I'm guessing, than post-sales side for Mackenzie. But I guess, Natalie, curious on like, how are you all leveraging notifications, right, to try to be more proactive, get in front of your reps, your end users, and what are some of those specific ones that you might have set up that are useful?
Totally. Yeah, so a lot of these we do use Scratchpad for this. So it's a way for us to directly communicate with the reps, and sometimes the reps and their manager, or send it to a team channel to ensure that people are following process and inputting the data that's needed to help the op progress down the pipeline. So some of these are things like if a close date is approaching, maybe, and it's not in late stage yet, a reminder to push out your close date. Or if an SDR has kind of booked a meeting for you as an AE, and that meeting has passed already, but the meeting still says it's upcoming. Maybe let's update that status, update the notes there, give the SDR some feedback. And then maybe if we measure stage duration. So maybe if the opportunity has been sitting in a certain stage for longer than our ops do on average, it'll send out a notification to say, hey, this has been stalled here for a while. Can leadership help? Can ops help? Who can we get involved to move this deal along? And then, I think of the next step one is common across, pre-sales and post-sales of, next step, there's nothing there, what's going on with the opportunity? Like what can we expect to see in the coming days and weeks? And then the other notifications, I can let Mackenzie speak a little bit more to those as well.
Yeah, Mackenzie, there's a couple on here around like, the op is closed one, the renewal's coming up, past due renewal. How are you all kind of tackling this notion of stale data as something that obviously impacts kind of data hygiene? And how are you all leveraging kind of notifications, right? The ability to be proactive rather than relying on your team to be reactive. How are you all leveraging notifications as a solution to solve for that?
So what's good to note is our CSMs also work ops. So when they're working a renewal, they're also working an opportunity in Salesforce. So as Natalie mentioned, like the next step being updated is important, because in the same way that you want to make sure there's not stale data and there's an actionable item that's moving the process forward, is what's the next step? When was this last updated? So we both have that next step field as well as a timestamp in order for us to be able to then trigger the automation. And then we're looking at when the renewals are coming up, so 90 days out at a minimum. We want our CSMs to be engaging with the customer and figuring out that strategy, making sure that they're basically on pace to close the deal on time. And so that helps them in order to just know sort of like what's upcoming, what should they be really focusing on, and in tandem with that next step being updated or not, they can see like are they on course or are they off base. And then we also use one about past due renewals as a way to flag to both the managers as well as the CSMs themselves, is that maybe something is off course, especially now with the economic situation everyone is seeing as deals are taking longer. There's more stakeholders involved in order to even re-sign a contract or an amendment. So making sure that the leaders are abreast of that. And then one other one that I actually forgot to put on the slide here is also about the sentiment. Is by using a red, yellow, and green sentiment about the renewal and the overall relationship with the customer, is the managers can also know where to help with those deals, and again, make sure they're not going stale, or that maybe we need additional support, because maybe when a deal is in the red, do we need to bring in a solutions engineer? Do we need a manager? Is there just not a fit with the product, whatever it may be? And so trying to give the notifications, but also being mindful to not set too many. I know I can say at the beginning, I was super excited. I was like, I want to send a notification about everything, but just making sure that you're mindful and taking that feedback from the team about, okay, this was really helpful, but these other things, although they're nice to know, are kind of inundating my Slack with too many things.
Yeah. And I think Moritz brought this up in the chat, but I'm curious too, do you all also leverage the, so this is a great way to be proactive, right? Notify the end user about like things they need to be aware of. Moritz brought up this idea of, and I've heard this from some others before, on kind of the, the clean your room, sort of like dashboards, reports, right? Rather than, maybe notifying them for every single deal, be like, hey, here's a place where you can go to see all of the things, right? Like all of the, the opportunities, the contacts, the accounts that might have data quality issues. Do you all have a notion of those like clean your room sort of dashboards, reports that people can look at Crunchbase, and how do those play along with some of these notifications?
I guess I'll start, and then I know Natalie has some things to share as well. One of the things that I have, we have some dynamic dashboards in Salesforce, and one of the things I have is I'll usually put like a change me or an action item, and I put those near the top of the dashboard. The dashboards also contain metrics that relate to their comp, things that I know the team is checking. But at the top, it's that friendly way of saying, hey, like I know that you want to get paid out for the deals you're working and you want these to cross the line. So make sure that you're looking at the reports regularly, and ultimately give them the agency to decide how often, what the cadence is. And then we have, for that, we have parallel views built in Scratchpad. So like if someone has a lot of something that's a change me, or as Mark said, a clean your room activity, they can also go right into Scratchpad, find that view, make some quick updates. And that's one of the ways that we're able to do it. And as well as using notifications within Scratchpad that aren't just one-offs, but sometimes that open up to a view so that someone can see all of the applicable tasks that relate to whatever it is they're doing or not doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, second everything Mackenzie said. I think like including those, for me, what I've found for the sales side of including the reports in, let's say, the AE dashboard that I know that they look at every day to see where the team is at, what their quota attainment is, where pipeline is at, where everyone is at holistically across the revenue org, and then including like a few reports that say like update me next steps, and then update me amount, or update me stage, and having that included in the place where they already go to look, instead of creating a whole new dashboard for them to go to, I found is something that gets them excited and allows them to get that visibility and also take action on the things we want them to.
Yeah, it makes sense. So I heard, obviously we talked a bunch about kind of the deduplication process at the front end. I think on this, we talked a lot about like the notion of stale data, right? And just keeping your data up to date. I think the things I heard are that are important are, one, obviously like the notion of providing, like a dashboard or a report that can outline, all of the potential like data issues that should be owned by a particular rep, SDR, manager, whatever it might be. But then also wanting to provide, kind of proactive notifications to help people like get in front of some of those challenges. But then I think the thing that resonated the most with me that both of you said is also make it easy for people to like to either make those updates, right? To update a close date, update a next step, right? So make it as easy as you possibly can to do that. I know, like you mentioned, you all use Scratchpad for notifications and to like do some of those bulk updates, things like that. But then also like on the reporting side, you mentioned like put those dashboards or those reports where people are already going, right? Like don't force them to go to some new place. And I think same thing on the notification side, right? As you mentioned, these are going into Slack or places where people are already working. So, you know, just like you would with your customer, right? Like show up where your end user is, right? And try to eliminate as much friction from that process as possible. And that can, you know, kind of make huge leaps and bounds on the data side. Okay, so next I want to talk a little bit about kind of process adherence. So we talked about data hygiene, deduplication, stale data. So on the process side, obviously, like this is a great way to like eliminate data issues before they present themselves, right? Like set a process, follow a process. And so I guess on the like on the sales side, Natalie, maybe start there, and then we can talk about how this translates on the post-sales side to Mackenzie. But yeah, like how do you kind of use, you know, call it like guidance, whether it's within your CRM, Salesforce, what you have here, to just make sure that things are, you know, like getting set up successfully, that the right fields, things are getting filled out, completed, and that people are adhering to the process that you've kind of, you know, currently laid out for them.
Totally. So we have, of course, a bunch of things in the back end set up. We have a ton of validation rules to ensure that fields are, you know, required and reps are reminded to fill in the certain fields at different stages of an opportunity and by broken out by role. But something that so that the validation rule doesn't even have to come up, basically something that we've done to help encourage reps to have those fields top of mind is leverage, you know, we use Salesforce and they have this guidance for success, and it is only available in Lightning. I, as somebody who only used to use Salesforce Classic, was convinced to use Lightning because I saw this of how helpful it was. You know, by having this pop up to guide the rep at each stage of the journey in the sales process, found that to be super helpful. And again, it was about meeting them where they were, right? Like they are in Salesforce, or like Scratchpad, but like they're in Salesforce. They're looking at their opportunities there. By having this right at the top of the page for them so that they can see what are the things we recommend you to send. And you know, in case you forgot from the ROE training we did last week, what are the fields that are required at this point? By helping nudge them along the way, we found that to be really helpful in getting reps to input the data that we need and they need. And it's very easy for us to change, which is great, given what Mackenzie said earlier, and that the goalposts are constantly shifting. So being able to change that is helpful as well.
Yeah. And Mackenzie, is this something that you all do on the like post-sales side for things like renewal opportunities and expansion ops and all of that stuff too?
So we don't use exactly the success guidance framework because this is like an input that the CS team receives. We're actually working on implementing a CRM for the CS team that will help us do something similar. So similar to the success guidance, using a playbook, having the playbook so that when a new customer comes in, they're receiving some targeted actions or tasks within that CRM in order to fill in the information or check on different data points.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess same, you know, call it same framework applies, right? You have kind of a process, a playbook that you want individuals, teams to follow and do that consistently, right? And so you want to make sure that that gets deployed in the place where they're working and managing their accounts, their customers, their renewals. And then I guess, yeah, so Natalie, on like on the kind of again, like on this notion of kind of highlighting, or I guess being kind of proactive with like notifications, things like that. it sounds like not only are you doing things on the like the account side that we kind of talked about before, but you've got some other things set up to look at like opportunities to watch, right? Managing like opportunity data. I guess talk through some of those things that you all have done, like maybe the challenges that popped up first, and then why you kind of deployed a solution like this.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think like one of the biggest things that we were facing was trying to understand sometimes when, a lot of pipeline is created by the SDR team, pipeline's generated, that's great. What happens to that pipeline? And how do we make sure that that pipeline keeps moving and never gets stuck? And so we want, and, we have playbooks, we have different, documentation and guidelines written for reps on, what do you do at each stage of an opportunity? How do you progress an objection handling, support, resources, all that. But we wanted to see at like a high level, let's say all opportunities that created this month, how do I know which ones I should be keeping an eye on as a manager, for example, in a one-on-one? So I created these different highlighting rules after collaborating with our sales leadership to see what type of ops would be helpful to be called out. So things like where our opportunity age is of this opportunity is greater than our average sales cycle. So we see, okay, this is already taking a really long time to move down the line. Let's dig in deeper with that opportunity owner and do that. And so all of these things that we, highlight, and these are screenshots from Scratchpad, but like we highlight this in Salesforce reports, anything like that. We get all of that data and we come to these different highlights by collaborating with the leadership team, which allows us to build and allows us to surface those opportunities that would be to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know, one of the things that I've heard from, a bunch of people is like just, start to timestamp, date stamp, everything that you can, because, you talk about here, like where the overall opportunity age is greater than your average sales cycle. If you're measuring days in stage, which I think you all are, you can also start to look at, has this deal been in this particular stage longer than normal when you look back at all the other deals that you've won. And with the goal of highlighting the things to watch, like if you think about, especially for a company like Crunchbase, right, with all the data that you have, is like you've got so much data on what a successful deal looks like, what it takes to win a deal. So leverage that data, apply it against your current pipeline to just understand, where are the outliers, right? And what is still within the kind of normal expected range. And then how can you easily raise those things to the team, to the managers, the directors, to the reps that need to manage them. And it sounds like obviously like Scratchpad is a big tool that you all use, but yeah, like talk about, I mean, I guess maybe that is the solution here, but and Natalie or Mackenzie, I don't know who wants to jump in first, but you brought up like the tiles as a way to kind of get in front of the account executive or the customer success manager. Like, how are you all using that today to help with this notion of kind of process adherence and just making sure that people are kind of following the playbooks, right, that you've built, that work, right, and that can make them successful?
Yeah, I can go for the sales side. So I think one of the things that when we just rolled out the playbooks and we just had a sales playbook and documentation in Google Docs or anything, what was a big difficulty was like, okay, rep, you need to fill out X amount of fields. If you move it into proposal, Salesforce is just, we've had our Salesforce since before I joined in 2018. So, as I think we got Salesforce in 2016 maybe, but it's been a long time. So there's a lot of fields, a lot of data in there, a lot of different sections, a lot of iframes that can make it slower to load or difficult for a rep to navigate through. And then for the experience of the rep, when we think about it, of them, filling in what they think, clicking save, getting that validation rule pop up, the error that says in red text, like you missed X fields, and scrolling to find it or whatever, it's not a great UX for them. So what we found that the tiles were helpful is that rep is using Scratchpad, they need to move it to, they need to add an opportunity product. Boom, there's a tile that says opportunity products. And then there's just one button. So it focuses all their attention on the one thing we need them to update. That's been super helpful.
Yeah. And then Mackenzie, it sounds like you have a bunch of use cases on the customer success side as well, the post-sales side. Is that right?
Yeah, so similar to Natalie is we want to make sure that people fill out the fields, but know that when they're in Salesforce updating and trying to figure out what is the field that I need to update and where is the one that I'm missing. What I also like to focus on with our teams, whether it's the reps or the CSMs, is that if they're updating these tiles as they're on a call or they're doing something in live time, it can also save them time after the fact because they're getting the right information from their disco call or they're getting the right information during that QBR, filling in the information that's required of them, but also because it adds value. Because of course, like you enter this fine territory with data around like having someone sort of be this, okay, I have to do this task, I'm doing this task, but you really want them to understand like what is the value that this brings to our whole sales cycle, to renewals, to upsells, expansions, etc. So trying to figure out where we can build in that information and make sure that they're filling it out, so that ultimately the end goal for them is also met. So we definitely do that for what they're updating after a QBR, what they're doing during the onboarding process, leaning into renewals as well. And hopefully, like I said, that helps them get the right information and then helps when the AEs join back on the accounts for upsells that they also have the information and the full context.
Yeah. And one question on from Moritz on forecasting. I guess one of the things I'm curious on kind of the new sales and then on the renewal side here as well. So we talked about like data and capturing the right data, and we've talked about things like, hey, make sure that like next steps field is completed and that these things are done, right? But I guess Moritz's question was around like, hey, that stuff can all be completed. And I can't remember, Mackenzie, if it was you or Natalie who mentioned like sentiment. But how do you, like, for example, activities can be happening, right? Like AEs can send emails to the prospect, right? But if the prospect isn't responding, that it might look like there's a bunch of activity happening on the account, but it's not the right type of activity. And so how do you all, and I guess, Natalie, maybe we start with you, like on the forecasting side, kind of pre-sales side, how does the notion of like the data you're capturing and then the quality of that data impact the like the forecasting that you all do on monthly, quarterly basis? And then Mackenzie, I'll be curious for you all on the renewal side as well, like how you look at that whole notion of sentiment.
Yeah, so great question. I think, one of the things that's been helpful for us to do that we started doing last around June time was I would meet with sales managers and do these we broke down our forecasts to even just a weekly forecast and then monthly and then quarterly. And what we would do to really understand where are the gaps in our data is I would come to the sales managers with a top-down forecast where I'm only looking at the data in Salesforce. So I'm looking at the data where the ops that have a close date within this month or this week, ops that are, as old as our sales cycle, and applying our win rate and different conversion percentages to those numbers. And then I'll meet the sales managers with that data, and then they will meet me with their data where they're coming from the reps and they're saying, okay, actually, there are a lot of other ops that you didn't include in your forecast that is going to have us land at a way different number. And then we'll meet in the middle, and that will help us understand, okay, maybe those opportunities weren't included in mine because they're missing certain data points or data fields, or I'm not including or looking at different things that are important to them, So that helps us understand on those weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis of, what types of data should I be looking at to help with the forecasting? What types of data should be required fields? What types of data should be included in validation rules or our guidance for success or playbooks? How should we adjust things? We're able to answer that through these meetings where we come together and see the discrepancy. And then over time, that discrepancy between my top-down forecast and their bottoms up, so to speak, becomes less and less the more aligned we are.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, have one person come at it bottoms up, another person top down, and that can influence, I think, the how close or how far apart you are, right, can influence how you each, kind of approach things going forward and then iterate from there. Yeah, Mackenzie, how does that look on, or maybe how's that different? How's that the same on the renewal side as you all are doing forecasting for renewals and expansions?
So perhaps unsurprisingly, the overall framework is the same. And one of the reasons for that is when we realized that forecasting was an opportunity for us as a company, we used one of our weekly meetings where we have all the rev leaders on a call together to talk about how are you forecasting? What are you looking at? What are the ways that what are the things that you're leaning into to try to figure out where we could take the wins from either side and then tackle the opportunities together as well, even though we have slightly different objectives. So using definitely sentiment and looking at where does it fall on the scale of red, yellow, green? And we're also currently building a health score in order for us to take that sentiment into account, but also take things into account like their usage, if they had an upsell or maybe they had a downgrade. And so a similar approach is just looking at what do we project in terms of our numbers from that top-down approach, but then also the bottom-up from the rep and also looking at the data. And we found that sometimes the managers were really in tune to knowing like, this is the deal that we're concerned about, but it wasn't reflected in the data. So figuring out like, what can I do as an ops person to help make sure that the CSM is also updating that information. So when we come to the table, we can accurately present the information so that we're not then going up to our board and directors and saying like, okay, this is what we have in red, this we have in yellow, we feel really good. And then the next week seeing that it's totally different. So a lot of that at the beginning, I would say a little bit more manual work, like look through, kind of dig through that information and then find a way that we can automate it and build that into the process.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then, so next, in the last, like 10, 15 minutes that we have here, I want to talk about alignment, because now we've talked about, some of the data hygiene issues that can present themselves, how you can potentially eliminate, solve for some of those things, right? Like office hours, deduplication tools. We then talked about process adherence, right? How you can, ensure that people are following the standard, process that you've laid out, eliminate data issues before they become issues. And then want to end here on this notion of alignment, because obviously, I mean, between you two, right, we have kind of pre-sales, post-sales, represented. And if you think about, revenue operations in general, like that's obviously what it's supposed to accomplish, right? Be the glue that holds the go-to-market engine together. That means marketing, sales, customer success, pre-sales and post-sales, kind of all marching to the beat of the same drum. And so on the alignment side, we'll talk specifically about how you all, approach alignment across the entire, kind of go-to-market function at Crunchbase. And so I guess, Natalie, probably for you, one of the things you've got on here is helping with prospects account health, but maybe talk a little bit about this and what you all are doing to drive alignment on this.
Yeah, definitely. So for this one specifically, we were hearing from ops was hearing from sales that there were, deals that were being pushed out further and further because of, the economic climate. So layoffs or, companies not having budget right when, we were initially hoping to. So what we did was we collaborated and used, our tool to build a search where we were able to surface per manager, any of the companies that AEs had active deals with that had layoffs in the last 2 weeks. So that way the manager would be notified when any of those deals did have a layoff. And then that way they could take that into account, and use that with their forecasting, use that and incorporate that into their pipeline management and their one-on-ones with their reps, so that they have a full holistic view on how is that kind of account going. It seems like it's positively trending towards a close one by the end of the month, but maybe they, just hit a layoff. And so we should push that out.
Yeah. And Mackenzie, is that, are you doing the same sorts of things on the, on the post-sales side, either as it relates to, renewals and kind of expansions as well? Trying to identify what those signals might be to indicate account health?
Yes, so I guess this is our little Crunchbase plug, but our team is also using, what they'll do is they can take their list of customers and then they can build similar queries and lists in Crunchbase and then receive those signals so they can know if there's layoffs, if they're adding new people, maybe they had a funding round. And the CS team is using that not only to just generate touch points and reach out to the customers, but figuring out where that sentiment is, even if they haven't talked to them or even looking at their usage data. And so we use that information as a way to either insert that in QBRs or perhaps start a conversation about an upsell. And again, like that same pairing with pulling in the AE where necessary, is the AEs also have similar lists that they can use for the accounts that they've sold to in order to look out for upsell and expansion.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And this gets to kind of this next one on, you know, some of the stuff we were talking before of you know, like meeting people where they already are. But talk about some of the views that you have set up for, or that you have set up for different, I guess, stakeholders, right? Whether it's you know, kind of reps, managers, partners, whatever it might be. And kind of how you approach, I don't know, like segmenting that, and maybe why you made some of the choices that you did. So I don't know, Natalie, if you want to start on the like on the sales side, but yeah, curious on that.
Yeah. So we had a bunch of views just all built out. Like Mackenzie and I built out a bunch of different things that we thought would be helpful. Ops closing this month, this quarter, this week, outbound pipeline, and then maybe like ops that are, you know, have a close date of in the past, or basically a bunch of different views. But by not segmenting them, we found not really using those views that we created, and would end up creating duplicate views or creating views that were, you know, as everyone knows, like, you know, you change one filter in a Salesforce report or something and you can get a totally different number. And so we found that was causing a lot of discrepancy, you know, and maybe an SDR manager would come to a meeting and say, hey, our pipeline's this, AE manager finds a different number, and then there's friction. And then even, you know, bring in marketing. And so by creating one centralized place that called the attention of the role, like, hey, AE managers, start here. Like, this is like in Scratchpad, we know that these are the 4 views that you should look at. You should look at your team's ops that are closing this month. And then these are the ops that were created this month as well. So you can keep an eye on how those ops are being worked. And so by doing that, we're able to create one source of truth, less confusion, and ultimately less work for the reps and the managers and leadership overall, because then they didn't have to go about creating their own reports.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the thing you mentioned there, right, is that, you know, like all those things you mentioned at the beginning of, you know, like past due ops and like all these things that were kind of specific, they're all relevant to you in revenue operations, right? But that doesn't mean that they're necessarily all relevant to, you know, the SDR or the SDR manager or the account executives, right? And so, you know, think about, like you said, think about your end user, think about where they are, and think about what's important to them, and how can you deliver the standardized you know, kind of information to them that maybe, you know, the same that maybe the AEs or some other stakeholder wants to see as well, but, you know, kind of look at where your end user is, right? And then deliver the information that they need to be successful. And yeah, like you said here, give them one place to start, and then provide them with the tools, the capabilities to you know, to kind of dive in or double click or do the things that they want to do within those views. And then, yeah, let's talk about, I guess the other thing I'm always curious about, you mentioned obviously that you're doing things like RevOps office hours. I think you said you're changing like the topic or the theme of those like every week. But yeah, what are some other like just operating rhythm, cadence stuff that you all are doing to drive alignment across the different teams at Crunchbase? And yeah, like how can other people on this call, right, maybe like take some of these things and deploy them within their own org to help drive that same alignment?
We've definitely been, I would say, over the past year and a half, I've been at Crunchbase trying different cadences and different meetings. And so first caveat would just be like, try something. If it doesn't work, don't be afraid to change it, cancel the meeting and start again, or take some feedback. We meet at the beginning of the week on Monday mornings, we meet as a revenue org. So we meet RevOps, all of the leaders from sales and from CS. And so we sort of have like a stand up in terms of where we sit with our numbers, where we're at, what's going on. Natalie and I have also both implemented our respective sides of pre and post sales, a bi-weekly sync where we just meet as ops with our respective sales leaders or CS leaders. And we try to use that as a way to be available for them, to talk about forecast and pipeline management things, but also just, hey, do we need a working session? Do we need to like work on something together? And then we also have a weekly meeting where we meet with the CRO and then those respective leaders as well. So sometimes that bi-weekly prep session we have can also act like a little bit of a dry run for what we're going to talk about with our CRO and the director. And just trying to create those spaces in terms of making sure that we don't have too many meetings on the calendar, but we also have enough that we actually overlap and aren't trying to do everything via async. Anything to add in there, Natalie? Anything else you'd highlight from that?
No, I mean, I think that covers it. The other agenda that we had listed was is for that revenue org meeting on Monday mornings where we meet together, sales, CS leaders, RevOps, and that's a meeting that's changed quite a bit over time. Like at first we were meeting every day, then we were meeting twice a week, and then we were meeting every other week, and now we're meeting every Monday, and we found that each week is a different. Again, this idea of themes to make sure that it's not the same repetitive meeting, and so people are engaged and stimulated, and it's productive for everyone involved.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I know I've experienced myself is like, and I like what you all said about like start somewhere, right? Don't overthink it, but like if you don't have alignment or if you have issues when it comes to like operating rhythm, like start somewhere. For me, I know like I've done basically exactly what you both described. Like, okay, we're gonna meet every Monday morning, and at first that was an hour-long meeting, and then after a while it was like, okay, I don't think we need an hour. Let's change this to just 15 minutes, and like I'll send out the we'll do some async, right? Like I'll send out stuff in advance, and the 15 minutes is more just like a quick sync, and then we were like, oh, that actually doesn't work. Maybe we need like 30 minutes. And then, like you said, maybe it's every week. Then it shifted to every other week. Don't feel like you need to like have the perfect solution at the very start, but do something to get started. And yeah, iterate, right? Same way that you do with same thing your company does with their product, right? Is like, do the things that work, but like start something, learn, iterate, move forward. And I think that's the thing to apply on the operating rhythm as well. And then in the last, like, I know we're at top of the hour, but I just want to talk about the maybe like this notion of like the monthly and quarterly frameworks that you have. And Natalie or Mackenzie, I don't know who wants to kind of wrap us up on this, but just give us the quick, 30 seconds if you can on this item.
Yeah, so I'll try and do mine in 15 and Mackenzie can do 15. But basically in Monday morning meetings with the cross-functional leaders at the end of every month and quarter, ops comes to that meeting to provide a look back into seeing what happened in that previous time period. What can we learn? What are those takeaways, and what can that mean for us moving forward? So I look at on the sales side, closed won deals, closed lost deals, as well as pipeline created within that quarter or month or time period. And within each bucket, I have different criteria that I look at that's specific, that we found is like specifically helpful to track month over month, quarter over quarter, year over year, that can help give us those insights as to what can be successful and what learnings we can apply moving forward.
Anything to add, Mackenzie?
I would add is that I feel like from our side, we bring the data, and then what we're hoping for the managers is they meet us with the sentiment, being the boots on the ground and working with the teams, and we try to pair those together to find some action items and perhaps like some quick wins in the next month that we can apply and say, let's do that differently and see if that moves the needle at all. Yeah.
I like what you said on kind of, it sounds like a true partnership that you all have, and truly kind of bringing the things that you each have respectively together, and kind of making the best decisions from there. So we're about a minute over time, so thank you to everyone who has stuck around. For everyone who participated today, Mackenzie and Natalie, thank you very much for dropping a bunch of knowledge on everybody as well. With that, I will let you all run. But again, thank you very much for joining, and I'll see you on the flip side. Hopefully see you at our next event. So take care, everybody. We'll see you.